Friends, welcome to Geopolitical Economics. Today, we're dissecting a major shift in North American trade that's unfolding right now, in January 2026. Forget the headlines and diplomatic sound bites. We're going deep into the numbers that are reshaping the relationship between the United States and Canada. This isn't about politicians. It's a case study in how resource dependency can completely flip the script on economic power. Our approach is simple. We follow the data. We're not interested in speculation, but in documented evidence and strategic resource mapping. While most news focuses on what leaders are saying, the real story is found in three critical areas: control over minerals, energy security, and the ability to find new trading partners. These quantifiable metrics explain the timing and intensity of recent policy moves from Washington. Let's start with the baseline trade relationship. According to official Canadian data from 2024, energy exports to the United States were massive, valued at around 127 billion Canadian dollars. This makes Canada the single largest foreign energy supplier to the US, a strategically vital position. But here's the catch, the critical asymmetry. While Canada is America's top energy provider, the US market accounts for over 75% of all Canadian merchandise exports. In contrast, Canada makes up less than 18% of America's total imports. This imbalance gives the US significant leverage. Canada's economy is highly sensitive to American policy, affecting everything from jobs to tax revenue. In negotiations, this kind of dependency is a powerful tool. A customer that represents 3/4 of your business can, in theory, demand a lot. This principle has historically guided American trade strategy. But what happens when that powerful customer discovers they can't get essential goods from anyone else? That's when the power dynamic begins to recalibrate. This is what we call counter-leverage, and it's at the heart of what's happening today. Now, let's introduce the game-changing variable: critical minerals. According to the United States Geological Survey, or USGS, America's dependence on imported critical minerals has skyrocketed, jumping 31% since 2020. Why? Think about the massive push for electric vehicles, the race to build battery factories on American soil, and the modernization of the US military. All of these national priorities require huge amounts of specific minerals: lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, and rare earth elements. The problem is, these minerals are not everywhere. Global supplies are finite, and opening a new mine takes years of development. So, the reserves we know about today are the limiting factor for America's strategic ambitions for decades to come. This is where Canada re-enters the picture, not just as an energy supplier, but as a mineral powerhouse. USGS surveys confirm that Canada controls a significant portion of the world's identified reserves. We're talking about 18 to 22% of global lithium, crucial for every EV battery, about 7% of global cobalt, a staggering 28% of global nickel. And let's not forget uranium. Canada holds about 18% of the world's reserves, essential for America's nuclear energy expansion plans. These aren't just abstract percentages. They represent tangible supply chain vulnerabilities for the United States. When a single, friendly neighbor controls nearly 1/4 of the world's lithium, that nation becomes indispensable to your entire green energy transition. And when that same nation also holds massive reserves of other critical minerals, its strategic importance multiplies exponentially. For the past couple of years, American policymakers have been talking more and more about supply chain resilience and critical mineral security. Official documents from the Department of Commerce reveal a growing anxiety about relying on supplies from geopolitically unstable regions. The strategic calculation in Washington has become a stark mathematical problem. American manufacturing and defense goals require specific quantities of minerals. Global supply is concentrated among a diverse group of nations, some of whom are direct competitors. In this complex global puzzle, Canada emerges as the most reliable, secure, and geographically convenient source for 40 to 60% of America's identified mineral needs. This reality creates a strategic necessity. The old leverage dynamic, where the US held most of the cards due to its market size, is being fundamentally altered. The need to secure a stable, long-term supply of critical minerals from a reliable partner is now a top-tier national security priority for the United States. This dependency on Canadian resources gives Ottawa a powerful new form of counter-leverage, changing the entire tone and substance of bilateral negotiations. The US needs Canada's minerals as much as Canada needs the US market. So, the next time you hear about trade talks or policy announcements between Washington and Ottawa, remember the underlying forces at play. It's not just about oil, lumber, or cars anymore. It's about the essential building blocks of the 21st century economy. The quiet, data-driven story of mineral dependency is rewriting the rules of power in North America. Thank you for joining us at Geopolitical Economics. If you found this analysis valuable, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. See you next time. Have you ever wondered what happens when a country's closest ally suddenly becomes its biggest headache? Today, we're diving deep into a high-stakes economic chess game between the United States and Canada, a game that reveals the hidden tensions in one of the world's strongest alliances. It all started with a major crisis for Canadian farmers. In 2024, Canada's agricultural sector, which employs over 2.3 million people, was in deep trouble. Canola farmers, a cornerstone of Canadian agriculture, were facing a staggering $3.2 billion loss. Why? It was a direct result of following America's lead. When the U.S. imposed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, Washington pressured Ottawa to do the same. Canada complied. China's response was swift and targeted. They hit back with retaliatory tariffs, and Canadian agricultural products were right in the crosshairs. Suddenly, Canadian canola exports to China were blocked, and the economic pain was immediate and severe. This left the Canadian government with a very tough choice. Option 1, stick with the U.S. trade policy and let Canadian farmers continue to suffer massive financial losses. Option 2, break ranks with Washington, cut a separate deal with China, and save their agricultural industry, but risk angering their powerful southern neighbor. It was a classic dilemma, loyalty versus survival. And what happened next sent shockwaves all the way to the White House. Canadian policymakers decided they couldn't let their farmers go under. They looked at the numbers, weighed the risks, and made a bold move that signaled a major shift in their foreign policy. Canadian negotiators began holding secret, independent talks with their Chinese counterparts. They weren't asking for Washington's permission. They were acting on their own to protect their own interests. This was a huge departure from Canada's historical tendency to align with American policy. They were essentially telling the world, and especially the U.S., that they were willing to forge their own path. The result of these negotiations was a landmark agreement. China agreed to drop the punishing tariffs and reopen its market to Canadian canola. In exchange, Canada agreed to allow a specific number of Chinese-made electric vehicles into its market, 49,000 units per year to be exact. This figure represents just under 9% of Canada's total EV market. It was a carefully calculated trade-off. For Canadian farmers, this deal was a lifesaver. The agreement immediately restored access to a market worth over $2.1 billion annually. For the 47,000 canola farming operations, many in rural communities across the prairie provinces, this meant income was restored and their livelihoods were secured. It was a massive win for Canadian agriculture. But what about the Canadian auto industry? The deal did create new competition. An estimated 8,700 jobs in domestic EV manufacturing would face pressure from the imported Chinese vehicles. However, the government's economic models suggested this would be balanced out by other benefits. The increased supply of EVs would drive down prices by 12 to 15%, making electric cars more affordable for Canadian families and helping the country meet its climate change goals. It was a complex calculation, but one that Canadian officials felt was worth it. Now, you can probably guess how Washington reacted to this. They were not happy at all. American trade officials were furious. This brings us to the core of the issue. Why did Canada's independent deal with China provoke such a strong negative response from the United States? The answer isn't just about cars or canola. It's about power, control, and something geopolitical experts call leverage recalibration. See, for decades, the U.S. has held significant leverage over Canada because of Canada's dependence on the American market. When the U.S. says jump, Canada usually asks how high. But by successfully negotiating its own deal with China, Canada proved it had other options. It demonstrated that it didn't need America's blessing to secure its economic future. This move fundamentally weakened America's negotiating power over its northern neighbor. Even more worrying for Washington was the precedent this set. If Canada, a close ally, could successfully diversify its trade relationships and act independently, what would stop other countries from doing the same? What if Mexico, Japan, or the European Union started cutting their own deals without consulting the U.S.? Suddenly, America's ability to dictate trade terms and build economic coalitions against rivals like China would be severely diminished. This isn't just theory. We saw the American reaction play out in public. The U.S. Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, who manages trillions in U.S. trade, publicly condemned the Canadian agreement. He called it inconsistent with Allied coordination on critical trade challenges. That's diplomatic language for you broke the rules and undermined our strategy. Lutnick's statement was a clear signal that Canada, its actions had weakened America's hand in the global economic competition with China. Think about it from the American perspective. Every time a country like Canada finds a new major trading partner, U.S. leverage over that country decreases. If this happens with dozens of countries, it's not just a minor setback. It's a structural change in global power dynamics. America's position as the indispensable economic partner starts to erode. So what happened next? The U.S. didn't just complain, it acted. The intense pressure from Washington on other issues we've seen recently, like energy security, control over Arctic resources, and defense spending, isn't a coincidence. These are all attempts by the U.S. to regain the leverage it lost. By emphasizing security partnerships and defense dependencies, American negotiators are trying to find new ways to tie Canada's hands and ensure its alignment. It's a strategic pivot to re-establish control through different means. This Canada-China deal, which started with struggling farmers, has revealed the fragile underpinnings of the U.S.-Canada relationship. It shows that even the closest of allies have competing interests, and in a changing world, middle power countries are starting to assert their independence in ways that challenge the old order. What we're witnessing is not just a trade dispute, it's a glimpse into the future of global geopolitics, where power is shifting and old alliances are being tested like never before. Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis insightful, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the forces shaping our world. See you next time. Ever wonder how countries really play the game of global politics? It's not always about grand speeches or public handshakes. Sometimes the real moves happen behind the scenes, driven by cold, hard numbers and a nation's own self-interest. Today, we're diving deep into a fascinating story of how Canada, a so-called middle power, is quietly reshaping its relationship with its giant neighbor, the United States, all thanks to something hidden deep beneath its soil. It all started at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Mark Carney, a prominent figure in international finance, laid out a new game plan. He called for middle power nations like Canada, the UK, Australia, and Japan to team up. Why? To protect their ability to make their own decisions and push back against pressure from bigger players. This wasn't about being anti-American. It was about survival and smart strategy. Think of it like a group of medium-sized businesses forming an alliance to negotiate better deals with a massive corporation. It's not personal, it's just good business. This move was a direct response to a shift in global trade. When larger countries start making take-it-or-leave-it offers, it's a rational move for smaller nations to band together. They saw their ability to negotiate freely was at risk. So this coordination was a form of economic statecraft driven by the need to protect their own industries, like agriculture, and to find new trading partners. When the underlying math of global power changes, a country's policies have to change with it. Now, here's where it gets interesting. After these public statements, diplomatic signals started flying. Invitations from Washington were reportedly adjusted. In the world of diplomacy, this isn't just about hurt feelings. When one side pulls back an invitation after the other makes a policy statement, it's a clear signal. It tells analysts that the first country's attempt to exert influence didn't work. The withdrawal essentially says, our original plan didn't achieve its goal, so we're rethinking our strategy. It's a high-stakes chess move, not a personal spat between officials. And how did the other side respond? By staying cool and focused? Instead of getting into a public war of words, they concentrated on implementing their own plans. In negotiation theory, this is called confident positioning. Think about it. The ones who shout the loudest in a dispute are often the ones with the fewest good options. When you know you have a strong hand, you don't need to argue. You can just quietly proceed with your plans, confident that your objectives are already secured. So, what gave Canada this confidence? What was the ace up its sleeve? The answer lies in geology and global demand. It's all about critical minerals. Beneath about half of Canada's vast territory lies a geological treasure chest called the Canadian Shield. According to government surveys, this area holds massive, strategically vital reserves of minerals that power our modern world. We're talking about lithium, cobalt, and nickel. Let's look at the numbers because they tell the real story. Canada is estimated to have 3.2 million metric tons of lithium. That's over 8% of all the lithium identified on the entire planet. For cobalt, the estimate is 890,000 metric tons. And for nickel, a staggering 12.4 million metric tons. These aren't just big numbers, they are globally significant quantities. Let's focus on lithium for a moment. The International Energy Agency predicts that to meet our global goals for electric vehicles, the world will need about 2.8 million metric tons of lithium every single year by 2032. That's a massive jump from current production. Here's the key. No single country can produce that much on its own. Suddenly, every nation with a major lithium deposit becomes a crucial player. The math is simple. If global demand is 2.8 million tons a year and nobody can supply it all, then everyone with a piece of the pie has leverage. Canada's reserves alone could supply the entire world at that projected 2032 demand rate for over 14 years. From an American strategic perspective, ensuring a friendly and reliable supply of Canadian lithium isn't just a nice-to-have, it's a strategic necessity. The story is just as dramatic for cobalt. Global demand is projected to grow significantly by 2032. Canada has identified reserves represent about 32 years of global supply at that future rate. Cobalt is essential for high-tech batteries, jet engine turbines, and advanced aerospace technology, all industries central to America's economic and military strength. Having a secure source for 32 years of global cobalt demand right next door, that's an extraordinary strategic asset. This brings us to the timing of this entire diplomatic recalibration. Why now? Because we're at a pivotal moment in history. The global push to transition away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy is causing the demand for these critical minerals to skyrocket. As demand goes up and supply struggles to keep pace, the value of these resources increases exponentially. For a country rich in these minerals, this is the perfect time to assert its influence. The scarcity is now real enough that major powers can no longer ignore the strategic importance of their resource-rich neighbors. And there's one more layer to this complex geopolitical puzzle: the Arctic. Thanks to climate change, decades of satellite data confirm that the Arctic ice is melting. This is opening up new frontiers. We're seeing increased access to shipping routes and the vast untapped resources lying beneath the Arctic land and sea. One of the most significant of these is the Northwest Passage, a sea route that runs through Canadian territorial waters. This passage is a potential game changer for global shipping. It could cut the distance between markets in Asia and Europe by over 7,000 kilometers compared to the traditional route through the Suez Canal. Imagine the time and fuel savings for cargo ships. Control over such a route is a powerful strategic lever. So when you put it all together, a clear picture emerges. It is a story of a middle power nation recognizing the immense value of its natural resources in a changing world. It's about leveraging those assets: lithium for the EV revolution, cobalt for defense and industry, and strategic Arctic waterways to carve out a more independent and influential role on the world stage. This isn't just about Canada and the US. It's a template for how the global order is being reshaped, not by ideology or old alliances, but by the fundamental realities of resource security and economic self-interest. The quiet shifts happening today, driven by the minerals beneath our feet, will determine the balance of power for decades to come. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown of modern geopolitics insightful, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world. See you next time. Did you know the world is quietly shifting from a single superpower to a system with many influential players? And the key to this change isn't just about armies or economies, but something much more fundamental: natural resources. When middle power nations start getting smart about how they use their resources, the whole game changes. By diversifying who they trade with and taking more control over their own resources, they can limit the power of any single major country. This isn't just a theory, it's happening right now, and it's creating a new multipolar world order. Take the United States, for example. To modernize its military, keep its industries competitive, and transition to green energy, it needs a steady supply of specific minerals. This creates a huge dependency on other countries. Nations that control these critical minerals suddenly have a lot of negotiating power. Consider Canada. It holds a massive chunk of the world's lithium, nickel, and cobalt reserves. This gives Canada leverage that's directly tied to how much America needs those resources and how scarce they are. Here at Geopolitical Economics, we see this as a major trend to watch in the coming years. So how do we track this massive global shift? We monitor changes in trade relationships, we watch for announcements about new resource projects, and we pay close attention to strategic statements from governments and companies. This approach gives us real, tangible evidence of how the international system is evolving. We believe that understanding these deep, structural mechanisms is far more reliable than getting distracted by political personalities or superficial news headlines. It's about following the data, not the drama. Our subscribers at Geopolitical Economics get a systematic breakdown of what's really driving global policy. We look at documented resource dependencies, measure shifts in leverage, and map out strategic resources. You won't find us speculating or focusing on who said what about whom. We stick to the hard evidence, numerical analysis, and proven strategic frameworks. This method gives you a much clearer picture of what to expect in future global policy. Let's look at a recent example. Canada. We've seen them adjust their trade policies, shift their diplomatic focus, and start flexing their resource leverage. This isn't about being hostile to old friends or abandoning alliances. It's a smart, rational adaptation to new realities. When the numbers change, when resource availability shifts or new market opportunities appear, governments logically adjust their policies to serve their national interest. It's a predictable and necessary process. This is a core principle we follow. Nations act based on calculated interests, not personal feelings between leaders. Understanding this is key to accurately predicting future events. The Canadian policy changes we've seen are a perfect case study. Their government calculated that boosting their agricultural income, advancing their climate goals, and developing their resource leverage were worth making some policy tweaks. In response, American policymakers tried to find other ways to regain their own leverage. These are rational moves based on national interest, not a personal feud. Here at Geopolitical Economics, we'll continue to analyze these developments by digging into the data, official statements, economic metrics, and established international relations theories. This rigorous approach offers far more reliable insights than the personality-driven, speculative reporting you often see. We want to thank you for joining us for this analysis. If you want to stay ahead of the curve on resource security, trade dynamics, and the strategic rebalancing of our world, we encourage you to subscribe. Our next analysis will dive into similar shifts happening in Europe, its trade relationships, and Asia's resource dependencies. Thank you for supporting rigorous, data-driven geopolitical analysis. We'll see you in the next one. Have you ever wondered what's really happening in the vast, icy expanse of the Arctic? It's more than just snow and polar bears. It's quickly becoming one of the most critical geopolitical hotspots on the planet, and Canada is making some seriously strategic moves that could reshape global power dynamics. Let's break it down. As Arctic ice melts, new shipping routes are opening up. Imagine a shortcut for global trade, right across the top of the world. By 2035, experts predict these routes could handle up to $24 billion in shipping value annually. That's a huge economic prize, and with it comes a struggle for control. Who gets to set the rules? Who enforces environmental standards? Who profits? These are the billion-dollar questions. Historically, the United States has viewed Arctic waters as international territory, emphasizing freedom of navigation. But recently, American attention has shifted towards security and defense in the region. This isn't a coincidence. It's a clear signal that the U.S. recognizes the Arctic's strategic importance for future resources and trade. It's a classic case of what experts call strategic competition. When valuable resources are discovered in a new frontier, the world's major powers take notice and diplomatic tensions rise. The Arctic is one of Earth's last great treasure chests, packed with minerals, oil, and gas, not to mention its prime real estate for controlling future trade. So how is Canada responding to this? They're playing a very smart, long-term game. In international law, one of the strongest claims to territory is something called effective occupation. Basically, you have to prove you're actually there, using the land, governing it, and investing in it. And that's exactly what Canada is doing. They are pouring money into Arctic infrastructure, new research stations, an increased military presence, support for civilian communities, and resource development projects. Each new building, each scientific study, each patrol, it's all meticulously documented evidence. Canada is systematically building a rock-solid legal case for its sovereignty over its Arctic territories. This isn't about starting a fight. It's about defending its interests, using the established rules of the international game. It's a rational defensive strategy to protect what is rightfully theirs, especially as the value of those resources is projected to skyrocket. But Canada's strategy doesn't stop at the Arctic. It's part of a much bigger picture, a masterclass in what we might call asymmetric leverage. For decades, Canada's economy has been deeply intertwined with and dependent on the United States. This can be a huge vulnerability. So instead of trying to challenge the U.S. head-on, Canada is diversifying. They're actively negotiating new trade deals with other countries and economic blocs around the world. Think of it like a personal investment portfolio. You wouldn't put all your money into one stock, right? Canada is applying the same logic to its national economy. Now, this pivot isn't without risks or costs. Building new trade relationships takes time, money, and a lot of effort to harmonize regulations and build trust. In the short term, analysts estimate this transition could reduce economic efficiency by a few percentage points, but the long-term payoff is massive. By diversifying, Canada could slash its economic vulnerability by as much as 60% over the next decade. It's a calculated trade-off, short-term pain for long-term security and independence. Is it the right move? Well, that depends on your tolerance for risk. A cautious approach would stick with the familiar, stable partnership with the U.S. A more forward-looking analysis, however, sees the danger of having all your economic eggs in one basket and champions the move towards diversification. To understand what's truly driving Canadian policy, we need to look at their actions. It's not about abstract theories, it's about tangible results. Take the agricultural sector, for example. When a trade dispute threatened over $2 billion in canola exports, affecting nearly 50,000 Canadian farms, the government didn't hesitate. They fought hard to reopen that market access. This single action speaks volumes. It shows that policymakers are prioritizing the real, measurable income of their farmers and rural communities over the theoretical benefits of maintaining a specific trade alignment. Concrete benefits for Canadian citizens trumped abstract geopolitical postures. Then there's the climate change dimension. Canada has made serious commitments to reduce its carbon emissions. A key part of that plan is getting more people to drive electric vehicles. But EVs can be expensive. By opening up its market and increasing the supply of EVs from various global manufacturers, Canada has helped drive down prices by an estimated 12 to 15%. This makes it easier for average families to make the switch from gas to electric, directly helping Canada meet its climate goals. So, the trade diversification strategy isn't just about economics, it's also a powerful tool for environmental policy. And it all circles back to the Arctic. By strengthening its presence and documenting its control, Canada is building leverage. As the world increasingly needs the resources locked away in the far north, Canada will be in the driver's seat, holding the keys. This strategic positioning ensures that when other nations come knocking, Canada will be negotiating from a position of strength. When you put all these pieces together, protecting farmers' incomes, accelerating the green transition, and securing long-term control over Arctic resources, a clear picture emerges. This isn't a series of random, reactive decisions. This is a sophisticated, multi-pronged national strategy. It's a deliberate and coordinated plan to secure Canada's prosperity and sovereignty for decades to come. What we're witnessing is a quiet but profound shift in the global order, with Canada playing a chess game while others are still playing checkers. The implications of these moves go far beyond North America, setting the stage for a new era of international relations. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown interesting, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world. See you next time.